Welcome to this edition of Fortune Editorji Biz Buzz. This is your fortnightly look at some of the key business issues with very special interviews. Rajiv Dubey, Editor-in-Chief of Fortune India, is here as well. And Rajiv, you've got a really special guest this week.
Thank you, Vikram. Yes, in the midst of all the health crisis, who better than the guest we have today, the head of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country.
Right, Umang Vohra, Global MD and CEO of Cipla, joining us on Fortune India Biz Buzz. Thanks so much, Umang, for joining us. And as Rajiv said, who better than you to tell us what is actually happening in the world of pharmaceuticals? You, of course, 85-year-old company, you've been doing such a sterling job in really putting India on the global map when it comes to pharma. But I mean, you know what I'm going to start with, because frankly, for 18, 19 months, all that anybody's been thinking about is COVID. So I just wanted to start off by asking you how you see, in particular, the vaccine campaign running. Production seems to be stepping up. We've had a few big days, on the PM's birthday. How do you see that vaccine production rollout happening? And anything you can share with us on how your plans with Moderna are going?
Well, thank you for having me, Vikram. Great to be here with you and Rajiv today. I'm happy to share that, at least from a vaccine perspective, I think a lot has progressed in India. I actually think that we might be close to the overall stated goal of trying to have as many people, or I think the number was over 70% of the people vaccinated by the end of the year. I actually believe in those numbers. I think it's very much possible. I think production has stepped up significantly. And I also think that, in 6 months after December, we could have everyone having both those doses. I do have to say, however, that I think this is probably a constant battle. It's not a battle just about vaccination. As we're now learning from the US and from several other places in the world, the vaccine prevents the major illness, but we still have to be vigilant across COVID. So I think there will be a combination of vaccination, which is card one in this battle, but there will always have to be, drugs that can cure you if you definitely get this even after your vaccination. So I feel quite good about vaccination per se. I think the world has probably enough capacity for the production of vaccines. I think the big countries, if we were to just step back, the big countries' vaccination requirements are probably nearing completion. It would take the next 6 months, right? So if you were to just name those, the big ones, I think China, we hear less about their story, but probably at a stage where they're completing their vaccination campaign. India is going to finish probably ahead. And I think what we've achieved out of just 700, 800 million doses, unparalleled. And we've not seen this anywhere in the world. The US is probably completing their vaccine campaign. That's another 350 million people country. I think there are some pockets where this is not completed. I think most of Africa is still pending a vaccine. And that's where the world capacity will begin to focus, in my opinion, in the next 6 to 8 months. And you will also see in parts of Latin America. But I think by and large, Europe, US, Japan, some of the rich countries in Asia, India, China, I think that accounts for almost 40%, and I would like to believe 60, 70% of the world population. They're all well attention with vaccines. So I think overall great progress. That's how I would think about it.
What are the learnings, Umang, out of this? Because there has been accelerated development of vaccine. We've seen how quickly pharma companies, vaccine developers came together, how quickly regulators responded to this. Do you think this is going to rub off on long-term drug development processes, regulatory processes? Are regulators even open to that idea, or do you think things will go back to normal, to the old ways of doing things after this is over?
Yeah, and I think it was a great question, Rajiv. I'm hoping that things change, right? And I think if you were to just step back and look at the mega trends over the last 3 to 4 years, and I'll come specifically back to COVID and what it's taught us. But if you broadly look at it, there are 3 or 4 areas that the world, combined is moving to. The first is this whole transition of illness to wellness. There are larger sections of society today who actually want to be treated, who don't want to be treated when the disease comes, but want to stay healthy, right? And you see this in a manifestation of the number of Fitbit apps the world is using, in the type of vitamins they take, in the type of tests that they get done. That's the first one. And there's a global collaboration, right, in making this journey move from illness to wellness. The second, I mean, as a broad trend in pharma, if you look at it, everyone's targeting, and this is right into your question, Rajiv, and I'll come to that in this point. This is really about, we believe for generations, right, at least in India, that your own body can look after itself. And where modern science is going, right, the biology of the science is exactly the same, right? So if you look at what does mRNA do, or for that matter, CAR T therapy doing, or stem cells doing, right, as three broad areas of science, and to some extent antibodies, right? They're basically equipping, assisting your body biologically to look after itself. And so, several of our Rishi Munis, our texts always had this, that the body has the ability to heal itself, right? And this is the second broad trend. We see a huge amount of global collaboration here. In fact, the reason the vaccines came out soonest was because, for whatever, and I don't want to get into any political issue here, but China shared the code of what they thought was hitting them, and that code was shared across the world, and the world collaborated in coming out with vaccines within a period of 9 to 12 months. So that was the starting point. The starting point was the sharing of a DNA code across the world, and then everyone just coming together. So we see a huge ecosystem partnership, right, between academia, right? You had the Oxford vaccine, between smaller, biotech firms, and between everyone else across the world in just coming together and solving a problem. And the third one that I would probably put as a trend is that I think the regulators are getting, they're moving fast as well. And I think if you're a regulator, there are two things that you look at. You look at the hypothesis or the prediction, right? So what's happened now in the world we live in, the data science and technology is allowing you to predict, is allowing you to marry your prediction, right, with the evidence that your data generates. And that process is moving really quickly. So what took years to put together in terms of computational power, in terms of using computers to simulate whether the hypothesis would hold up with data, now takes, or at least 10, it just takes about 10% of that time to put it together. So it's moved the discovery process faster, it's moved the biology process faster, and it's inherently that much more easier today to come out with the right drugs faster and sooner. So I think this will continue. I think this is going to continue.
So just before we leave COVID behind us, just on a couple of the collaborations that you at Cipla have been doing, obviously you did a lot of work on remdesivir, on tocilizumab as well, which you've been doing. And then on the vaccine front, we heard that announcement on June the 29th that you're coming in with Moderna. Emergency use authorization was given, and the possibility that Moderna could be used as a booster for people who've had Covishield. So just wanted to get your sense of those plans, both on the treatment side, and do you see that within a few months in India also, because you're right, it's possible we vaccinate a lot of people, there may be a requirement for boosters, and the boosters could be mixed vaccine boosters. So you had Covishield, now get a Moderna booster. Is that what we're going to see?
I think we're going to see it in parts of the world, Vikram. I think the US just yesterday or day before made a decision that they weren't very clear whether boosters would be needed as immediately as some of the companies thought. But yes, I think I think definitely, if we were to just crystal gaze this into the future, we are seeing that this virus is probably going to be endemic to us. So in my mind, and I think in the mind of several others within the pharma industry, this is going to be no different than swine flu or another strain of flu which exists. So it will be in the society. When people get it, they'll have to isolate for 10 days or 12 days, right? And after that, it'll all be better. Now, supporting this infrastructure will be antibodies, right? Because if you are vaccinated, you're not in a good way, you will get an antibody shot, right? And sure enough, the cost re-engineering of the antibodies will happen, and within a year, you'd see more cheaper alternatives to it. You will have vaccines, and I think like the flu, a lot of people over 50 or 60 will probably have more boosters coming. But there is one issue, Vikram. When we look at the booster dose, that the flu vaccine, how the flu boosters get engineered versus what we are calling a booster today for COVID, there is a difference. You see, in the world, what happens with the flu is that every year the strain of flu is taken and a booster is engineered around that strain that they saw last, right? And there are two distinct strains in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. In the case of COVID, we have not been able to do that. The booster you're seeing is basically the prime dose, and it's probably because of time. It's nothing else. But I think where the next set of boosters are going to come is going to be more important, where boosters would get specifically engineered to a particular variant. So they'll get engineered to Delta, they'll get engineered to Alpha, to the Mu variant, to whatever it is. And that will probably create a bigger booster cycle. The booster cycle today is just in a prime dose. But I do agree with you. I think we are going to reach a stage, Vikram, where we will probably have boosters of different vaccine manufacturers, evidenced, of course, by data that they're creating in the UK and elsewhere, that if you had Covishield, you could use a booster of another of another vaccine. And I think we're close to that. My guess is that would probably be in place also by the next 3 to 4 months. Now, specifically to Moderna, we announced, as you mentioned correctly, that was to facilitate Moderna's application in India, which we've been able to do. And of course, we're still in discussions with them. And it also depends on their plan of approval within the United States, because the Indian authorities would go off an approval that was made elsewhere in the world. So I think that those discussions are still in place.
Umang, to COVID to some extent, and then this dramatic shift that is happening in our relationship with China is causing a lot of disruption in the supply chain. And and the future, it seems, is that the government would like the supply chains to be indigenous. So what does this mean for pharma companies like yours, in terms of the long term impact and implications of these?
Yeah, and it's very interesting, Rajiv. I think if we go back, let's just say post-independence, right? And I think there is a reason why our industry is where it is today. Post-independence, the most significant thing that India was trying to solve was self-sufficiency, right? So we re-engineered the cost of a lot of the medicines that were known there, and that gave birth to the generic industry for our country. And today we supply a large part of the world. But in that process, what also happened was a lot of our production got outsourced to China, because there the whole principle that we operated with was re-engineering a cost towards self-sufficiency, right? And that was the paradigm at that point in time. There are two shifts happening right now, and in that pursuit of cost-based re-engineering, we lost some of the key materials to that were manufactured in China, and China certainly came up with this cost engine, which was probably superior to everyone else. But there's a second palpable shift that is also happening now. There's a shift from self-sufficiency as being one pillar, and the integration of some materials that we are all now, a lot of the pharma industry is looking at how they can bring the penicillins back into India, how they can bring a lot of that production back into India and change and rebalance the supply chain. But there's also a second shift. And the second shift is self-sufficiency is one pillar, but the second pillar is innovation. You see, if you look at the China story, China's actually moved ahead on innovation. They've given pretty much a pass to the generic side of the world and moved into the more biotech arena of medicine. And I think we from India will probably move the same way, right? So we will try and conquer this in the next 3 years or 4 years, as much of self-sufficiency in terms of chain integration. But you have to leap and make that leap to innovation to be able to compete around, the new biology, the new biological advances that we are shaping towards. So yes, it will cause a little bit of balancing out.
And Umang, looking at some of the other things that Cipla has done a lot of work on, respiratory drugs, for example, which is one of the major items in your portfolio. It's interesting. It's like right now we are in the month of October is approaching, and if you're in North India, you have the sense of dread because you know what's coming. Air pollution is coming, and if you think about it, air pollution alone kills 3 million people in India every year, which is way more than COVID. So respiratory problems, if we can't solve things like air pollution, is that going to be perhaps a bigger threat than COVID and all of these other things put together?
Yeah, and great point, Vikram. I think respiratory problems, it's a little clean air, right? And I think this is a problem in our part of the world, the most significant part of the world in terms of population and industrialization. But if you were to broadly look at it, you're right, 3 million patients die of it. Our belief is that it is the same number of diabetics. The number of people who suffer with lung diseases is exactly the same number as of diabetics in India, which is about 90 odd million. And the issue with this is both an issue of awareness. It's also an issue of our ability to treat this disease and create an environment of cleanliness with respect to the air. So I do agree. I think as a developing country, as a country that's coming out, industrializing more rapidly, air pollution will continue to be a big issue. And you're right, in terms of Delhi, North India, it's the allergens at this point of the time that enter the tract and create these issues for a lot of people. So in the area of respiratory, I think we're trying to do a lot as well. I think one is, of course, I don't know if you're aware, but in the world, we are the second largest seller of inhalers globally. The first is GSK, the second is Cipla. And it is our endeavor to ensure that we are able to promulgate and educate people about how the use of inhalers is a lot better. So it just doesn't go beyond, it goes beyond just making medicines. We also have a campaign that we call Berok Zindagi, where we're trying to promote and break the stigma that steroid use is necessarily bad for you, that inhalers stunt growth. So it's basically trying to take an ecosystem approach. We're also doing a lot of diagnosis, and I think if you were to look at it, the worst test, by the way, the worst test that anyone likes to do today when they go for an annual health checkup is that lung function test. The amount you have to blow into that machine to get that right curve, right? And all of us just do it once a year. We're trying to create an environment where this can be on every GP's table, where it's not that difficult to take as a test, and where this diagnosis can happen at every single general practitioner. So we're working in the area of diagnosis, working in the area of inhalers, working in trying to create an ecosystem knowledge, letting people know how they can manage their ailments better. All of that is coming together in our quest to making sure that we can conquer this issue. And actually, you're right. The number 4 reason why people lose their lives is COPD and asthma across the world. And I think in India, it would be number 3. So it is a very heavy burden.
Yeah.
Umang, if I may come to the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and you are a very big part of that industry. You are facing as an industry one of the biggest regulatory squeeze, if I may use that word, in terms of new norms, new processes, very, very tight regulations coming in. What does this mean for an industry which is, and also economic nationalism on the other hand? And so, what does this mean from the point of view of an industry which is emerges, originates from India, and supplies to all over the world, and yet all these tightening of norms and squeeze is going to be kind of anti-globalization in some ways, right?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure it would be anti-globalization as much as it would be resetting competitiveness in the industry. I think I look at it that way. I think where the Indian players have reached in their ability to efficiently compete globally on a cost basis, on a time basis, because a lot of Indian companies are among the first wave to launch generic drugs across the world. Now with the regulatory action, a lot of us are investing in automation. A lot of us are investing in making our plants far more superior to how these plants would operate in the US, right? So the near-term hit of having a regulatory action is there. But in some respects, it's making the industry reimagine and rediscover the efficiency with which it can operate. So I actually think, the squeeze was there, as you would call it, over the last 3 years. The last 4 years and 1 or 2 years were in COVID. I actually see a future where the Indian industry probably operate at a level, both from a quality perspective as well as an efficiency perspective, that very few plants in the world will be able to emulate. Right. And I think it will actually may become in many ways a lasting competitive advantage. So that's one. But having said that, the near-term effect of some of these regulatory action letters, etc., would be there, and it would be volatile for companies, but all to the extent of positioning the industry far more competitive than the others. So I actually feel good about, I feel good about where the industry generally 5 years from now would.
Right. Let's just looking at one of the things you were saying about, the changes that are coming in the world of health and what the big opportunities are going to be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years later, miracle drugs that may be coming. And we keep hearing about even existing drugs, new ways in which they can be done to encourage wellness and to have a longer life. A metformin, for example, something that you do produce, its possible use in reversing aging is something which we are hearing some talk about. Of course, it's not proven yet, but those are some of the speculation.
Mm-hmm.
Which areas of medicine are really interesting you and exciting you looking ahead?
So the first is, Vikram, it's the biology of drugs. I think there is a reason, as I mentioned, there was the self-sufficiency aspect in India, which made us move more towards chemistry, right? Because it was always about re-engineering the existing drug, making it cheaper. So our industry moved towards chemistry, and now I think we're being pushed to move towards more biology, right? And anything around biology, which is when you're using the genetic material of our body, when we're using the genetic material of of organisms around the world, is going to make the difference. So let me give you a few specific examples. There are startups now which are using bacteria to deliver drugs into the human system, right? And the reason they use bacteria is because there are some parts of the body where only the bacteria can go and no other medicines grow. There's similar thinking around fungal infections. Can you use a fungal agent to deliver a certain drug load to a part of the body, because the fungal thing can manipulate the immune system? So it's thinking like that, which is possibly what is going, and the whole thing around genetic medicine, right? It's about how your genes are. It's about, I look at the mRNA technology and just trying to explain it very simply to somebody and, struggling with it. But basically, imagine a hardware and imagine a software. And mRNA is like an instruction to your body to produce something. So your own body is the factory of producing an antibody, right? Versus a regular virus vaccine that puts a small embodiment of DNA into your body stream. So I think science is going the biology way. It's going towards more personalization. It's about using your own body to create the immune response. So whether it's the area of stem cells, the area of biomedicines, the area of therapies such as CAR-T, or the latest technology science like mRNA, right? I think those would be 4 areas and platforms that I would think broadly where innovation would head, and even from India.
Okay. Rajiv, any final question?
I wanted to ask Umang the last question on what is the biggest learning for you as a company, as an organization through the COVID crisis?
So, Rajiv, I'm going to go off track here from the science discussion and the industry discussion. When you're grounded to a purpose, you can expect the same thing coming out from your people, right? So I think what's cool about this COVID crisis for Cipla is just how each person within Cipla reacted to the crisis. So everyone turned up in our factories to manufacture at the peak of the crisis. Our depots were brimming with activity. And when we went back to understand, what was it that made people come to work? Was it the money they were given? Was it anything else? And finally, it was not. It was their passion. How you coalesce. I think our biggest learning is how, we were set up 85 years back, but this daily inculcation of what we stood as a company is probably the most fundamental thing, right? So very often we lose the passion and the purpose that organizations are created for. But it's situations like this where that passion comes alive. So that was one big learning that I had. The second was just leadership. This was a time when people were working remotely. This is a time where many of us couldn't visit our factories, but we relied on local leadership. We relied on that enterprise, that human enterprise of making sure that things work the way they should and actually probably work better. That's my second biggest learning. And the third, and I just say the third opportunity for all of us to reimagine, not just our lives, but even our business models. It came to point, what is the most important thing in your life? It was health, right? And from there, you go to a soul-searching narrative about what matters most for your business, right? And you begin to reimagine, just like regulators have reimagined how they approve products. We are beginning to reimagine how we can use digital in all aspects of our business. So it's been phenomenal on a personal level. More learnings on how human beings interact and work together and create a marvelous outcome.
Right, Umang Vohra, thank you so much for joining us on Fortune Editorji Biz Buzz. Umang Vohra, the global MD and CEO of Cipla, joining us for this very special chat. Rajiv, great news once again, and look forward to another episode about a fortnight or so from now. Thank you all so much
Thank you
for
so much,
watching.
Umang and Vikram. Thanks. See you
Thank you.
soon.